Hi folks, with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car, your truck, or on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the astonishing events unfolding in Britain over the last several days and the response of the government, the UK government, to these events and who they're choosing to prosecute it, indeed the reasons for the prosecuting. Now, I guess there's a few things to start with here. Arbitrary arrest, arbitrary detention, all those sorts of things. They're very much the expression of a government or a state, a nation state that's under dire threat, imminent invasion, as in armed invasion, the tanks rolling down the streets, this sort of thing, or a government that's illegitimate. Now, those are the only two reasons why the response of the authorities in the UK, or it could be anywhere, but in the UK in this instance, why the response is as it is. Again, there's only two reasons for this, two causes for this, two causation factors. One is military armed invasion, which threatens the state to its very core, or that the government is illegitimate, the authority and the power they have is illegitimate, and in order to overcome this lack of legitimacy, they become extremely heavy-handed in terms of censorship and arbitrary arrest, arbitrary detention, and very selective prosecutions and politicization of the police, the judiciary, and so on. And that's what's happening here. This government is fully owned, controlled, directed, bought and paid for by the globalist cabal, and therefore they are not legitimate. They are acting in the interests of the globalist cabal. They represent the globalist cabal. They act for the globalist cabal. They are puppets of the globalist cabal, and thus they don't have legitimacy. And their response to this lack of legitimacy is to go around arresting people who disagree or who oppose them. And they believe anyone, or act as in anyone that has an alternative point of view, is defying them. It's defiance that must be crushed. And they're using all the devices. What does surprise me is how they're able to corrupt the entire prosecution service, justice, the police, the courts, the judges. I'm staggered at how they've been able to corrupt and politicize all those institutions so thoroughly. Institutions that were once held up as the shining examples, beacons of justice and jurisprudence and due legal process and independence of the courts. They once held up as international paragons of virtue in this regard, have now been thoroughly politicized. It's inconceivable to me. And again, if someone had said to me 25 years ago that it would be like this, I just wouldn't have believed them. I would have given them short shrift and told them they were just talking nonsense and they were crazy. But here we are. Today, here we are. So I just want to have a look at this. Now, as I mentioned in a number of videos in the past, in the communist states, particularly where armed revolution has caused a change in government, they've always got this, this terrible fear of lack of legitimacy because the people never voted for them, never agreed to it, never signed on, as it were. The power was taken at the point of a gun. And whether this was Mao's China with the communist revolution in China at the point of a gun, the Bolsheviks seizing power in the Soviet Union at the point of a gun, or what became the Soviet Union, Pol Pot seizing power in Cambodia at the point of a gun. It's universal. Even in say Eastern Europe, where Soviet infiltrators made sure that they rigged elections to make sure that communist governments were elected. Then there were no more elections after that. But they realised that the government was never legitimate. The government was always there in Eastern Europe, Poland, whoever it was, Hungary. The government was only in place because they rigged the election. It wasn't something that the people had actually voted for, and they knew that the people knew that the government wasn't legitimate. So in order to make it legitimate, you just arrest anyone who disagrees. And this is what's happening in the UK at the moment, in my view at least. And it's a scary thought that a supposedly elected government is doing this. But just to realise the gravity of what's going on, if you hold an opinion that the government doesn't like, they can put you in prison for that. You've committed no crime; it's an ideological wrong-think crime, but prison nonetheless. Whereas, if you are not opposed to the globalist project, but you commit a very serious crime, murder, rape, armed robbery, beating someone to a pulp, and this sort of stuff, then the state doesn't really consider that. It's undesirable, sure, but it's not really a problem. The prisons are too full as it is. Can't we give someone like that a good behaviour bond, or so? Can't we just sort of give them a finger wagging, telling off? Well, here's this person who's opposed to mass migration. Fucking prison for those Nazis. So this is the divide that's the bifurcation. This is the divide that's happening now. You oppose the globalist project, you're criminalised to the maximum extent possible. Whereas if you commit real crimes, murder and so on, don't really care. It's okay. Well, we'll deal with that later. Must be another. Maybe we'll just get a social worker to visit them every now and again. So because the people that are committing the murders, they're not opposed to globalization. They may even be on board with it. After all, they're mostly going to be brown and black people who want to come to a nice rich country and get endless handouts and so on. So they're kind of on board with the globalist project, albeit in a perverse sort of way, but they're at least and you can use these black and brown people for creating sort of social dislocation, which again is all part of the globalist project. But for those that complain about mass migration or complain about the effect of having illiterate third world peasants in vast numbers roaming around the streets creating havoc, if you complain, then you can. So let's just have it. Don't sell these globalists short. These are globalists that can rig a US presidential election. They can make 20 million phantom votes appear out of thin air for their preferred candidate. They can make inconvenient witnesses or potential witnesses in a high security prison. They can make them kill themselves while the cameras are turned off and while the security guards at the front gate and the security guards and warders in that wing of the prison are all magically fall asleep at the same time as the cameras are turned off and the dead bodies found the next morning. They've got, how actually can you get into a high security prison like that and arrange that sort of murdering? Wow. You've got contacts, you've got connections if you can do that. These are people who've got the power to move millions of folks from the third world into the first world and do so with impunity, and can coordinate. These are the people that can coordinate media companies all over the world to be on same message at same time, same syllables, the whole. So again, these people have huge and vast power and access to rules. Now, there's not many of them, but they have the key positions in the globalist cabal, whether it be in media or controlling governments or dishing out benefits and cozy jobs and so on. But if you just sort of look at the things that people are being put in prison and arrested for now, if you protest a rigged election, they'll put you in prison. If you protest a rigged trial because of the subversion of the judiciary, they'll put you in prison for that. If you denounce or question mass migration, that can have you in prison now. If you have the wrong opinion or share an opinion that disagrees with globalization, they can put you in prison for that. If you denounce riots and murders by black and brown people, they can put you in prison for that. That's racial hatred, after all. If you agree with someone who holds the wrong opinions, they can even put you in prison for that. So this will give you an illustration of just how ideological things are now and how ideological crime has now surpassed actual crime. And again, as it was in all the illegitimate governments of the world, every single illegitimate government in the world will do this, goes down this path, whether it's a new aristocracy that installs itself in whatever country in medieval times, it doesn't matter. But the issue of legitimacy is there. these people all work for the globalists, that they are not representatives of the British people or elsewhere in the West for that matter. Like Macron's not a representative of the French people. He's a globalist stooge, same as, Ursula von der Leyen and so on. All these people are globalist stooges. And because they lack the legitimacy and will never have it, because they never will be supported by the people, they claim that the people that don't support them are the ordinary people. As they sneer it out of the side of their mouth, the ordinary people. So we just say that their opinions don't count. If they don't like it, we'll put them in the fucking prison, which is what's happening now in Britain and indeed elsewhere around. So this is how scary things are at the moment. And who could have imagined it would get here? So one can only hope they don't rig the next presidential election. They've already tried to kill the guy and swamp him under lawfare and mountains of lawsuits and so on. But let's suppose President Trump gets up again and becomes president. He must and act very decisively. If you call a brown person or this hatred thing, this now must be universal. If you call anyone a Nazi, you call anyone far right, you call anyone a far right thug, then you are committing a hate crime. A fucking hate crime, and the police will come after you with gusto, same as they would if you misgendered somebody. So this must be universal. All hate. Now, so this will quickly neutralize the biggest, most potent propaganda weapon the globalists have. And if they can't run around and call you a Nazi or a fascist, then they're screwed. They've got most of their weapons will be neutralized at that point. So this has got to be priority numero uno when hopefully President Trump comes back into the White House, and it has to be from day one, minute one, even. And once these race baiters get prosecuted themselves, then things will take a very different turn. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.